But as for now, and without further ado, please welcome Philip Whiteley and Close of Play.
Thanks very much, Manu. As people know, for 15 years I've been writing non-fiction. I actually write specifically about management, and I've been trying to persuade the business schools that employees are human beings. I get some support for that idea, but occasionally come across fierce resistance. So I thought I'd try my hand at fiction and write something maybe light, maybe with a touch of humour, because I thought, how difficult can it be? And the answer is very. It is actually, certainly from my point of view, harder to write something light than to write something serious, counterintuitively. I have a newfound respect, I think, for P.G. Wodehouse or Richard Curtis or writers like that. But I thought I'd give it a go all the same. And as a freelance writer and ghostwriter, I'm dependent on commissions. So I thought maybe having a bit of royalties income might smooth out the highs and lows of income. So we'll see if that happens, of course. But everyone who's been freelance knows what it's like. You can get a bad year followed by a good year followed by a bad year, but then you have to pay tax on your good year. Life generally, and perhaps especially for a freelancer, can be unpredictable. Or as Shakespeare put it, who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay? Language really has evolved over that. And the little anxieties, it's lovely working from home, but occasionally you get a quiet spell. And then someone is interested in possibly hiring you for a bit of work. I don't know if other freelancers find this, but you have to pretend to be busier than you are, don't you? So the conversation goes something like, so are you free to come in for a lunch meeting to talk about this potential project, Philip, sometime over the next fortnight? I'll just check my diary, I say. It's completely blank. Oh, well, maybe I could do Thursday this week, Tuesday the next, if it's an early lunch. Because it's have to be back for pointless. I mean, it's an important meeting. And then the tough negotiations over the fee. In the strange world of management, there's an unwritten rule that people who use the spoken word are paid vastly more than those who use the written word. So if you use the spoken word, you see, you're a coach or a guru or a mentor. You have charisma, so you have to pay £1,000 a day. And those who use the written word, we can do a fraction of that because we don't need business class travel or taxis or food or anything like that. So the negotiation goes something like, so what would you charge for this, Philip? Oh, that's a few weeks' work rather than a few days. So maybe £6,000 or £7,000? Pause. Can you do it for 2,000? Oh, all right then. But the quiet spells do have their compensation in that you're able to work on the long unfinished opus, and that's why Close of Play is set in the 1990s, because that's when I started it. But I did get a publisher interested, the brilliant Matthew Smith, who's here today. Matthew, when editorial director at Kogan Page, had turned down one of my proposals for a non-fiction book, but it was by far the most intelligent rejection I've ever had. So I always had confidence working with Matthew. And it does mean that I can now say that I have the same publisher as Stephen Berkoff, the second most performed dramatist after Shakespeare. Not the first, but the second most performed dramatist after Shakespeare at the Edinburgh Festival. His new novel is called Sod the Bitches. It's reaching out to the female demographic. I haven't read it yet, Matthew. I've got suspicion it's not the same genre as Close of Play. So
Not quite a Christian.
We might not be sharing a platform. But although Close of Play is deliberately a gentle English comedy, there's just a few rough edges, not a swear word or punch in the nose or something. Actually, I wanted to reflect. I didn't want it to be too cosy or sheltered. England can actually be a bewildering mix. I know this from people who come to live here or stay here. it can actually be a confusing mix of the very genteel and the very crude, you know, and you can get both on the cricket pitch and in the pub, you know, and you know, it's a land of afternoon tea, but also football hooligans, and you get that in Ampthill here even, you know, it's a market town. We have our real ale pubs with the book club meetings and the pub quizzes. But occasionally there's a fight. You know, there was one the other week apparently, nothing to do with me, but and that's England, that's life. But although I sometimes think it's the book club where it all starts to kick off. Because those discussions can get quite heated. You know, I mean, you can picture it, can't you? But Darcy is the greatest romantic hero. No, it's not, it's Mr. Rochester. Oh, don't talk rubbish. Don't you talk to me like this. Leave it, it's not worth it. You can imagine. So, Matthew really liked Closer Play. There's a little bit of not disagreement, but he probably thought it was more romance, and I thought it was more comedy. And I thought, come on, it can appeal to blokes. There's a bit of banter, a bit of cricket. And he says, no. Most of your readers will be women, and I thought, okay, well, I can live with that. But maybe we've hit upon a new genre. We could call it a romantic comedy. You've got to be brave to be a pioneer, but it just might work. But taking Matthew's advice, I'm now a card-carrying romantic novelist. That's not a metaphor. This is my membership card of the Romantic Novelists Association. It really does exist. There are over 700 members, nearly 5 of whom are men. Who often write as Jessica or Joanna. Absolutely true. One of my most treasured physical possessions, along with a print copy of Close of Play, and this little chap I brought along as well, which is the 1996 Oakwood Hill Batting Award. 797 runs at average of 44. I had to look those stats up, of course, not like I've memorised. I beat Derek Coward, Richard Bowes and Carl Nichols. Legendary names. So it's entirely appropriate that for this launch we are here at the Cricket Pavilion of Ampthill Club, a club where I never won the batting award. In my penultimate season I averaged 30 with the bat, and in the final one it was 3. So I thought time to tuck the bat under my arm and pull the gloves off for the last time. But I'm now going to read just a couple of pages from the very opening of the book, if that's okay. Some very crickety bits. And then the lovely man who is going to interview me. Some tough questions. She's given me some of the questions, but I think she's holding some back. So this is the very opening of the book, chapter 1. It's a short reading, just a minute or two. Walk, don't walk. I could hear the dressing room banter from the lads before I entered the pavilion for the season's penultimate game. Do you think she'd go out with me if I asked? You'd have more chance if you didn't ask. No, but seriously, yeah, seriously, you're not in her league. Leagues? There are leagues? Afraid so, son. So if there are leagues, is there promotion relegation? Am I at least in with a chance of the playoffs? Well, yeah, but she's Premiership, we're all Vauxhall Conference. Or Mid-Sussex League Division 3, chipped in another voice. I could hear laughter, then someone saying, "Here, where's Cole? Not aiming to be late. He'd better turn up soon or Bodger will have to open, and he is A, still drunk from last night, and B, not here either." I appeared on the threshold. "Here he is," my teammate Tony announced as I appeared. Sightless all eyes were batting. I started to change and strap on the pads. Derek Cooper, the skipper, inquired, "Have we got a full team then?" There was sniggers around the small room with its waft of aftershave, beer, canvas and leather. "We got 10, Dell. That's as far as we get today, I think. Might have to call up someone from the seconds, it's only a friendly." "Isn't Bodger playing?" he demanded. There were hoots of laughter. "I tell you," said Greg, "if Bodger's alive after last night, medical science ought to know." State gee. Thought that German barmaid was going to have him barred. Yeah, she was scary. Well, I don't know, thought she was cute. Get away. "Well, she can have me any time. Not saying much you'd have anyone." "Fair point," said Tony good-naturedly. At this point, Eric Gray, he who was known as Bodger, appeared, looking grey, ill and triumphant. There were more hoots as he slumped on a chair near the door, lit a cigarette and supported his chin with his hands. "Don't tell me we're fielding," he said. "No, we're not," said Derek. "Thank Christ for that, I'll just go have a kick." "Yeah, well, you can't, you're number 3. "What?" He looked up, aghast. "It's so easy to wind up, you are," bastard, he muttered. Also, you're fined 3 times over. What for? Turning up late, swearing at the captain, being in an offensive state. Great start for the others. Yeah, well, I'm the captain, I'm not nice underneath, you know. Never imagined you were, Dale boy. Be fair, Derek, said Tony, he's always in an offensive state. You can't fine him for that. Shut up and get your pads on. The team had a comprehensive system of fines for turning up late, dropping a catch, being rude to the captain, being too deferent to the captain, running the captain out, running the best batsman out, not chasing hard in the field, and generally for other incidents in the course of the match that prompted the captain, the on-field's fines master, to decide that he didn't like the cut of your jib. Actually, it's a digression from that expression. Is anyone here watching Pole Dart?
Yeah.
It stars our very own Robert Dawes,
It's a monster.
my Irish nephew Aidan Turner. He's not really my nephew, but if I say that, attendance at my book signing.
Get your shirt off.
It wouldn't have the same effect. There's this lovely scene with young Verity and her gentleman friend, and they're flirting with one another, and he's showing her the diagram of all the sails on a fully rigged ship, and what they were, and what they're for, and what the design is. So I was able to say, for the first time in a literal sense, she likes the cut of his jib. Those of us who love the English language and the origin of phrases, that was a nice note. Anyway, why am I promoting pole dart? And plays a play. Yeah. There was also a fine for not buying a jug when you were due. Given that the cost of 8 pints of beer was considerably greater than the standard fine, 30p, it was often observed that the incentive arrangement needed adjustment, but generally it was concluded that the public showing should serve as incentive enough. These arrangements held for match day. For the tour, where 14 or so players were sharing accommodation for 4 or 5 days, an entirely new range of opportunities for levying imposts sprang into being. Many offences were delightfully contradictory. Going to bed too early, staying up all night. Dressing too slovenly at breakfast, dressing too smart. Others included phoning home too much and partaking of alcoholic beverage in the course of a game. This rule tended to be relaxed towards the end of the tour. These were the typical crimes, but the fines master, a duty which on tour was rotated on a 24-hour basis. This is all true, by the way. I've done my research. The fines master was allowed considerable discretion to invent arbitrary misdemeanours, such as a garish logo on your cricket boots, swearing in a foreign language. I once uttered the expletive merde when dropping a catch in the slips, or looking at me in a funny way. In a typical year, fines yielded more revenue than the annual subscriptions having to pay for the new pitch for the modernised pavilion. So that's the intro to the thank you for your attention. Now we have questions. Can you sit down? This is a chat show arrangement. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay, Phil, well, thank you for that. So I'll start with a question around, please come forward.
Oh, yeah, there's places in the front.
Simon doesn't bite. Not yet. So, Phil, to which extent was Close of Play inspired by the local anti-life?
Anti-life?
Yeah.
Well, not directly, because it was before I even lived here. That's why I set in Sussex. But I think some of the characters are very common to the cricket field. So, and I wrote it in 2 spells really. In the late 90s I started it, but I finished it over the last year or 2. So I think some of the ideas, I don't think any characters were influenced by people I know in Ampthill, you'd be reassured to know. But you know what gave me the confidence to finish it completely was getting to know other writers locally, like Alana and Rachel and others and Simon. And that, not just not just knowing other writers, but being able to exchange ideas and being able to read to one another. And I gave a reading from an excerpt last summer at the Beer and Books, I think our very first or second one. And I was a bit nervous about it, but it went down actually a bit better than I expected. So that actually gave me the confidence to finish.
Okay.
So Ampthill has been hugely influential, but in the process rather than the content.
Okay. So it's very funny because as I read through your book, I could somehow really identify, or I felt there was this real kind of feel of, I know where this is coming from. And obviously I was mistaken, but I suppose all small villages are more or less the same.
I think it may be subconscious as well. Yeah.
Possibly. Okay, so previously you've written management books. What made you want to write a romantic novel?
Specifically a novel or specifically romantic one?
Specifically, well, I'd say both actually,
both, yeah,
because
okay.
this is your first fiction book.
Well, I experimented with fiction when I was quite young, because I think probably I've been a writer for a quarter of a century now, and I think probably every writer thinks, oh, I should, try and invent some characters and get a novel finished. The reason it took so long, I wasn't working on it for most of that time. It was written in 2 spells. I got stuck with it, and I didn't have the skills to finish it. And then I came back to it some years later. But I think it's partly actually, there are some ideas you can convey in fiction that you can't in non-fiction. There's that freedom, you can just make stuff up.
Especially in management books.
Well, but I like to think I'm a conscientious journalist, and I only write the facts. Very, grad grind, So, but with non-fiction, you can explore opinions that you might not dare to put in a blog. You can put it in the voice of a character. Like Brian, the main character. He thinks society is collapsing because of punk rock and dumbing down the BBC. Now I have some sympathy for that view, but it's fun to be able to. But his conservatism gets a challenging ride in the course of the book as well. I would argue. So it's fun to put maverick opinions that you wouldn't perhaps dare put in a blog. You can put them in a character, and you can make them eccentric. Because I'm not eccentric, obviously.
No, of course not. And maverick opinions that you would never dare run past your friends. Okay, so your main character, Brian Clark, is rather conservative in habits and outlooks. He even thinks 19th century music is a bit too modern.
Yeah, just not Mussorgsky, too much.
Yeah. What made you want to create such an individual, apart from the fact that very secretly, deep down, you deeply relate to him?
I think, well, when I was young, you had kind of the hippie movement and the punk movement. And what was called the Old Order was, not, I wouldn't say completely swept away, but there was definitely, you had Monty Python, so, a lot of mocking of, stiff upper lip or class divisions. And I think that was modernising, was necessary, I support it. But I'm fascinated by the fact you often lose something. And I think maybe politeness and manners was lost a bit with that. And so I was interested, I'm very influenced obviously by the great French writers like Albert Camus, the greatest book ever written was, La Peste. And no matter how much a social change might be welcomed by some people or feared by some people, there's always someone who doesn't like it. Or something appears to be dreadful, there'll be someone who does like it. And I'm fascinated by what we lose with social change as well as what we gain.
I can certainly recognise here the feel the nostalgic soul.
Yeah, but even his nostalgia is challenged, without giving a spoiler.
Yes.
It turns out he didn't invent it after all. It's been around for a very long time.
And so the female lead, Elizabeth, is more liberal and more at ease with the modern world. What do they have in common exactly?
They have a shared reserve, Christian faith, and respect. And she realises that behind the gruff exterior, he's actually quite a sensitive soul and rather lonely. So there's a little bit of rescuing going on, I think. But I think she genuinely warms to him. And I think the scene that Robert and Amy will be reading later hopefully captures that.
Good. Looking forward to it. Why do you think it's so rare for a man to write a romantic novel?
Interesting question. The last time I checked, approximately 50% of heterosexual relationships consisted of men. There are some very unusual arrangements.
I get that.
but it's very unusual for a man to write or read a romantic novel. But I've been interviewed about this and thought about this recently. But if you expand the definition to romantic drama, when it comes to song, men can be very heartfelt. And for me it was normal, as I indicated before, when I was a boy in the late 60s, early 70s, it was the hippie age. So it was perfectly normal for men to grow their hair long, wear flowers on their shirts, and sing heartfelt love songs. And not just dripping then, but alpha males like John Lennon and Mick Jagger and Bob Dylan. So for me, that was normal. It was not only acceptable, it was cool.
That was just in the throat.
Yeah, but I was hopeless at music, so I had to do writing. I'm being married to a relationship therapist, that helps. But romance is fascinating as well as wonderful. And I'm not a huge fan of action movies either. I saw Jaws when I was 13, I regretted it. And I haven't been to an action movie since. It was awful. Now, I like rom-coms, it's a guilty pleasure.
Okay, great. Well, so there are hundreds of books published every week, never mind every year. Tell us, Phil, what makes you different?
I think one thing that perhaps makes, some people think that you write as a means to an end, like to be rich and famous. As Spike Milligan once said, I'd like to have the opportunity to discover if it's disillusioning. But for me, writing is just what I do. It's the thing I think I'm quite good at. It was my fourth attempt at a career. So I want to be a professional cricketer, and I tried to be an engineer, and then I tried to be a social worker. So it's my fourth attempt. It's the only I was successful at. And people say, but you know a lot about cricket for a writer. I said, no, you've got it the wrong way round. I'm not a writer who knows about cricket. I'm a failed cricketer who had to turn to writing in order to earn a living. So it's just what I do. It's what I do. And whether I reach 100 readers or 100,000, I've always got a story or an idea buzzing around in my head, and I like to try and get it down.
That's fascinating, Phil. And how do you research your books?
I'm very much of the school that you might call authentic literature. I think ideally you have an interesting life and then you write it up. You don't go away and research a subject. I think while there are some brilliant historical novels, I think some of them, they're a bit too weighty and a bit too much like non-fiction. And you feel the dead-handed research a bit too much. So I try to be inspired by real experiences, and I think you can be more heartfelt then. But of course, you have to be careful not to base them on real events too much, to respect privacy. But I try to write about the world that I know about. So, writing about the fine system in cricket, it was funny, wasn't it? I remember one game, I turned up late, I was out second ball, I dropped a catch, so I just said at the end, what, should I just write out a cheque or something? So that, I write about the world that I know about, and I think you can be authentic.
And then, yes, to the point, why cricket then? But I suppose you have told us why cricket. It's because cricket is your real passion, isn't it?
It's a passion, but it's infuriating, and it's very easily misunderstood. People think it's a gentle game. It's actually quite ruthless.
It's a bonkers game, if you ask me.
You haven't read the acknowledgements, have you?
No,
I read it out. I'll read it out. You're missing something. It is obviously a puzzle that the French intelligentsia never took to cricket.
Well, we would have beat you. No.
Actually, yes, that is a point. It's the most complete existentialist metaphor. You cannot decide.
Yeah, you've lost me on that one, I'm afraid.
You cannot decide.
Wait, let me think.
As a batsman, what the bowler is going to bowl, and you have less than a second to make a decision. So Jean-Paul Sartre, we are content to choose. We are content to decide. He should have played cricket. It would have been even better.
Well, I suppose you're the only one who know how to count the points, so you'd probably win on that round.
Runs, they're called runs.
Oh, yes, runs. Yes.
Albert Camus was a
runs, yes.
Camus was a goalkeeper, so that indicates he'd probably be more of a batsman than a bowler. But
Okay.
we can only speculate, can't we?
Right.
Ask him why he made Elizabeth an ex-nun. I'm curious to know.
I
Is
am
there some
fascinated.
secret? Is there some secret kind of
I've never been a nun.
fetishes? Something
She's not based
there?
on me. I did a fair amount of voluntary social work when I was young, and I knew lots of other people who did, and was very interested by someone who, by the limits to altruism, to what extent can you devote yourself to others, and to what extent is it fair or reasonable to be unkind on yourself?
But we all know, Philip, that altruism doesn't exist.
That's rather sweeping stuff. I think it does exist. But I don't think it, on its own, it can be a lifestyle. I think altruistic tendencies and gestures and nature is very powerful. Otherwise, nothing cooperative or worthwhile would ever get done. You think of the volunteers putting this evening on, and Robert and Amy not being paid, or at least I hope you're not. I mean, that's altruism, isn't it? That's helping your community. But I think what I was fascinated, the issue I'm very interested in is people who try to devote themselves to others, that can actually be too hard on themselves, and sometimes you end up not even being kind to others because it's too much of a strain. And I wanted to explore that with Elizabeth, and she's turned 40 and she's thinking, oh my God, maybe I should have married a nice man when I was 25 instead. And so that feeling of regret. Does that explain?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Phil. So now I think we'll have... thank you very much for giving us an insight then into some of the aspects of the creative process of writing this novel. We will now have a 25 minutes interval where we can have another gin and tonic and plenty of beer.
I can have a drink.
Followed by then a reading of a chapter of Close of Play, as well as Clumsy Angel by Robert Dawes and Amy Robbins, who I will introduce further later on after the interval. Pardon? Donations, what? Donations. Oh, yes.
We want your money.
We want your money. We'd love £3 donation roughly each per head tonight, if that's possible.
It's not for Philip's Beer Fund. It's for Antle Festival. So.
So the bar is open until XX this evening.
The bookshop is open as well.
The bookshop is open. So have a drink, and then we will start again in 15 minutes from now.
15.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.